Normandie, département de la Manche. Les îles Saint-Marcouf sont les dernières terres françaises en mer jusqu'à la frontière nord. Toute l'année, l'île du Large voit passer des plaisanciers et des hordes d'oiseaux. L'île de Terre est une réserve ornithologique interdite d'accès. À voir le calme ambiant, on a du mal à croire que ces îles se sont retrouvées au cœur du plus grand débarquement de tous les temps. Et pourtant, 6 juin 1944, le 4e de cavalerie. Aujourd'hui, 7 Américains nous racontent cette histoire. 7 témoignages d'un événement trop peu connu. 7 regards sur un moment de l'histoire et sur les hommes qui l'ont écrit.
The 4th Cavalry is one of the oldest fighting units in the United States Army. They fought the Indians back in the 1800s. They are currently deployed in the Middle East. My father was in the 4th Cavalry in World War II, which explains my interest in the 4th Cavalry. My name is Jim Wojcicki. I was born in Syracuse, New York in 1956. I currently reside in Manlius, New York. The 4th Cavalry Group consists of the 4th Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron and the 24th Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron. In the 1940s, early 40s, they did have horses. In 42, they did turn their horses in and they became strictly a mechanized unit.
It was early in 42, I got this letter. I lived in Rochester and working at Kodak. I came home from one weekend. My name is Emerson Johnston. I was born in Mount Morris, New York, but we're living now in Geneseo, New York. My mother says, "You have a letter here from the military." I opened it and it said, "Congratulations, you have been accepted." So immediately, they gave me 2 weeks to quit my job, pretty much give up my girlfriend and my apartment, and I went into the military up at Niagara Falls. Well, the cavalry moved to California, naturally with me, and we got our military training in the desert.
Their first stop was the Mojave Desert in California. The reason they went there, they thought they were going to fight Rommel in the desert. By the time their training was done, that part of the war had wound down and plans had changed. They next trained in Paris, Texas, Camp Maxey. Later they moved to Camp Shanks in New Jersey, where they were deployed to England in December of 1943.
The 4th Cavalry was stationed in Chichester, England. They stayed on these huge Earl estates, and they set up Quonset huts for their barracks. My grandfather was a 4th Cavalry man, and he died when I was 3 years old. So it was a way for me to get to know my grandfather that I didn't get to know growing up. My name is Sean Pregel. I was born November 6, 1980 in Dansville, New York. I currently reside in Wayland, New York. He went to his boss and requested leave of absence, and it was granted. So he went downtown to the recruiting office and joined the Army. My grandfather's good buddy, Gene Mascarella, was side by side.
No, Don Christ, way before we went in service. In fact, we were dating the same girl. We got together and we talked about it. He's a nice guy. Gene Muscarella, Geneseo, New York. I was born in Mount Morris, and here I am. England was mostly a lot of hikes, scaling walls with glass on top.
Well, personally, they sent me to code school where I learned to decipher German code. So then we began making our own code. So I spent the 6 months learning code.
During the day we practiced with landing crafts, and then in the evenings we practiced with rubber boats.
They would take a group of us and ship us to maybe the mortar units, and they'd say, all right, go out there and find out what's out there the next 3 or 4 miles ahead of us, come back and tell us what is out there and let us handle it. Now, the problem was it was kind of easy to get out there. It wasn't so easy getting back. They could see you going out, but they'd try to keep you from coming back and giving the information you had. We were prepared if we got in a fight.
Approximately 1 month before D-Day, Allied reconnaissance planes flying around Utah Beach discovered 2 small islands about 5.5 miles off the shore of Utah Beach called Les Îles Saint-Marcouf. Napoleon had built a fort on the bigger of the 2 islands, and the Germans had put logs out of the gun ports, painted the logs black, trying to fool the Allies into thinking that they had 88mm guns there. 7th Corps found this out and decided that those islands needed to be neutralized before D-Day because those islands were in the path of the invasion fleet coming from England to Utah Beach and Omaha Beach.
They just picked out a group of fellows to do that particular job. And that was no different than any other job that we had. Go in on the islands and find out if anything is there and report back.
Colonel Edward C. Dunn led 132 troopers to both islands. 66 went to each island. 66 of 4th Cavalry Squadron, A Troop, 66 24th Squadron, B Troop. Ahead of those 2 landing craft were 2 rubber rafts. Harvey Olson, John Kinsey, and 2 others paddled these rafts within 100 yards of the islands. They took out their knives, they sank the rafts, and swam the rest of the way into the shore in secrecy to sneak up on the Germans. When they got to the shore, they got out their flashlights and signaled for the landing craft to come the rest of the way in. This mission was at H-hour -2 at 0430 hours.
My grandfather was one of those troopers. Now he was in the 24th Squadron in Troop B, and they assaulted Ile de Large. It was the larger of the 2 islands. And their captain was Wales Vaughan, and he led that troop onto Ile de Large.
When we landed, my orders were to set up on shore and see that nothing lands after us. Well, I set up my machine gun, and about 50 yards from me was a torpedo. You know, I guess it was unexploded, and then word kept coming back that the island was full of booby traps.
some troopers started stepping on S-mines, and the troopers called them bouncing Bettys. Now, my grandfather, as all troopers will tell you, that the S-mines are pretty nasty business. They really tear you up bad. Don and everybody else were frantically working to get rid of these S-mines.
I was too scared. Believe it or not, I was. When you know it's a real thing, it's a different story.
They knew that there was a Napoleonic fort on the large island, and that necessitated the training of grappling hooks and scaling walls straight up. They weren't sure what would be on the other side of those walls. As it turned out, there were no Germans, but fortunately they did scale the walls, and the Germans had planted 200-pound bombs behind an iron door, which was the front gate to the castle. So fortunately, they did scale the walls, and no one was hurt by the door.
They shelled us from shore, and where I was, I had no cover at all, no protection. Just all rocks, and so I guess I told Don, I says, Don, let's get the hell out of here and get out of the moat. The tide had gone down, and there's no water in the moat.
And Don and Gene were standing in this moat. And I might add, at this time, the Germans were shelling from Normandy with medium artillery rounds, and they were hitting both islands.
We went down in the moat, and the shells kept coming. In fact, it wasn't even as wide as this room here, the moat. We were on one wall, and the bomb landed right across from us. Yeah, it's a wonder we didn't get more serious injuries.
One of those artillery rounds came down near where Don and Gene were standing.
Oh, it knocked me out for real. I didn't, but who was it? Don? Don got hit with the same shell.
My grandfather was shaken up, but not hurt. Gene was severely wounded. He had his stomach blown up.
When I got hit, my whole life just flashed right through. It's hard to believe that you can think of so many things, but it is. And they say, well, the shells that you are going to miss you can hear them. You don't have to worry about them. Baloney. I read my serial number on this one. I honestly, I thought I could hear the guy put the shell in the gun, but it had my name on it.
There were no doctors on the mission, only first aid men, very limited what they could do. So Don assists Gene. I don't know whether he picked him up or if it was a couple gentlemen that did it. So they get him up somehow, and they get him out of the moat, across the beach with the S-mine that had been cleared, and somehow found one of these first aid men.
And I remember the priest, he came over and says, Mr. Muscaroli, you have anything to say to your folks back home? I says, Father, I don't want to die.
Gene Muscarella devient ainsi l'un des premiers hommes blessés le 6 juin 1944 et les îles Saint-Marcouf, les premières terres françaises, libérées par la mer ce matin-là.
So they relayed the message to the USS Bayfield, mission accomplished, all secure. When that message was given, the shelling from the battleship started. This was about 5 to 5:30 in the morning. At 6:30, the invasion began.
Well, I had a grandstand seat of the initial landing taking place. I could see that from our island.
Unfortunately, one man was killed on each island. There were 17 troopers who were wounded on each island. They held the islands until the following morning, where they were relieved. They were transported to Utah Beach, where they rejoined their troops.
Well, there were a lot of dead people there. They pushed us right over them. I got my feet wet, but that was about all.
One of the claims to fame of the 4th Cavalry Group, they are the first soldiers to touch French soil on D-Day cross-channel. And the first soldier to touch French soil was Harvey Olson. He was the first to touch Ile du Large on D-Day morning.
La famille Olson vit à 6 heures de route de Minneapolis, à quelques kilomètres de la frontière canadienne. C'est le Midwest. Ici, on connaît le prix payé par les jeunes pendant la Seconde Guerre mondiale. Ici, le souvenir d'Harvey Olson traverse les générations.
My name is Shane Olson. I was born in Hallock, Minnesota on October 29, 1971, and I currently reside at Helma, Minnesota.
My name is Terry Olson. I was born in San Diego, California in 1966. I currently reside in Roseau, Minnesota.
My name is Curtis Olson. I was born in King City, California in 1957. I now reside in Lake Bronson, Minnesota.
This is the grave of my great-uncle Harvey Olson from Lake Bronson, Minnesota. He served with Troop A of the 4th Cavalry Reconnaissance in World War II. Harvey is buried next to his brother Laverne and his father Herbert Olson, who was a World War I veteran. Also buried a few stones away is their brother Ivan, who served in the Air Corps as a cook in the Philippines. My grandfather was a medic in the Philippines. They also have a brother that's still alive out in Nevada, who served with the 88th Blue Devil Division in Italy.
Very proud soldier, very proud to serve his country, and he was extremely proud of the people that he served with.
Growing up with Harvey was quite an experience. He was quite a warrior. Very strict at first, but he mellowed out. We did a lot of fishing, a lot of hunting. I learned a lot from him.
He volunteered for the mission of going in and swimming into those islands.
But he always spoke highly of going through it with especially Tommy Killoran.
They were best buds. Those two went in, they were the first two to land on the MARCOUF Islands. The other two guys that what I've been told their names were John Zander and Melvin Kinsey. There's no doubt in my mind, Harvey was a very competitive man. I mean, from the time he was a little boy growing up out here in the upper Midwest with his brothers, I mean, if it was wrestling or fishing or hunting, whatever it was, yes, he was very competitive. So I am quite positive that, yes, it probably was a competition to who was the first one on the island. I'm sure it was.
He actually called the islands at one point, he called them one of the more beautiful places that he had seen.
If you could have him here today, you'd probably have to probe him a lot to get, but he was very proud of it.
He wasn't a talker as far as his military actions. He kept that pretty much to himself. I would consider him sort of complex, having understood what he had been through his entire military career and some of the things that he had witnessed and experienced. I understood that as I got older.
And I wish I would have paid more attention to his instructions and just knowledge of life. But I couldn't ask for a better father or a better mentor or whatever. I could go on and on about him. I really miss him.
Harvey, for his actions on D-Day, was awarded the Silver Star Medal, which is the third highest honor that can be bestowed upon a soldier for the courageous action of going in armed only with a knife and a flashlight.
I think probably the nicest thing I remember about the war were the two recognitions I got from France. I got two, they call them diplomes. I got two nice ones, and I will treasure them.
The bronze arrowhead signifies the MARCOUF landings, which all the people that participated were supposed to receive.
Dad was never wounded. He did receive a Bronze Star Medal for valor. And when he returned to the United States, he worked for Krauss-Heinz, a signal company in Syracuse, New York. Married my mom in the 50s, and he raised 4 children. And he worked for the post office after Krauss-Heinz, and my dad died about 20 years ago.
I've had a good life, good long life. I'm 87 years old now, and I may live a few more years.
He was always very, very adamant. He was very proud of his 4th Cavalry service and for his time done. Didn't regret that one bit. He passed away on July 9th, 1983 of lung cancer and is buried in Springwater, New York.
Oh, I've always recovered. I've had trouble. In fact, this trouble I'm going through now is probably part of what happened.
Cette mission ne fut qu'un acte parmi tant d'autres. Elle n'est ni la plus sanglante, ni la plus héroïque de la Seconde Guerre mondiale. Mais sans l'opération Saint-Marcouf et le courage d'une poignée d'hommes, l'histoire du jour J se serait écrite autrement.